business, honey. Well, I'm in a rock and roll band, and we were headed for the top, babe. Way back in 91, some record business scumbags took it from.
So welcome to Choir Practice. I'm Lima Charlie, and it's October 2022. So what is choir practice? Well, choir practice is a term that those of us in law enforcement will use sometimes when we get together after a shift to kind of debrief, shoot the shit, tell stories, or just kind of hang out a little bit and unwind after a particularly rough shift or something like that. So that's how we came up with the name Choir Practice for this show. So why a podcast? It's a great question. I've been asked about doing a podcast or a show for a long time. I've been in the business, law enforcement, for a long time, since 1994. And I always get asked lots of hypothetical questions for my opinion on hot topics or current events, cool stories, if you've ever shot anybody, anything like that. This just provides a really good platform for me to answer questions and kind of talk about law enforcement, what's going on in that world currently as we speak. When I became a cop many moons ago, I had a trainer tell me one time, he said, "Hey, welcome to the greatest show on the earth." And I kind of raised my eyebrows and was, why is it a great show? And he just went on to explain, said, you'll see things, hear things, experience things that you would never, ever be able to experience in any other profession. And it's true, we deal with the whole spectrum of the human race. We see people at their best, at their worst, and it's never the same. There's never two shifts that are exactly the same. Heck, the job can change dramatically from one call to the next. Just a lot of crazy things and cool experiences. And if you haven't done it, if you haven't been in those shoes, you can't appreciate it and you can't understand it fully. But this is an opportunity for me to kind of talk about it and maybe kind of explain some of the ins and outs and the intricacies, some of the little things that you never think about when you hear about cops. So with that said, people have been asking me for a long time, hey man, you have a lot of great stories. You've got kind of a unique career path within law enforcement. You should share it. And rather than trying to write a book or do a memoirs of a cop, I figured this would be a good opportunity to do so. So we're working it out. There's been some technical difficulties with trying to learn how to do podcasting, meaning that I have a difficult time with technology. So we're going to try it this route and see how it works and kind of go from there. So why me? Why does Lima Charlie have any information that might be interesting or stories that might pique your curiosity or you might want to watch or listen to? Well, I don't know. Part of it's because I'm in the business right now, currently, as we speak. And over the years, I've seen a lot of people who like to talk about law enforcement and opine on different things that are retired or no longer in law enforcement, or they're towards the very end of their career. And that's great. I don't take anything away from them. If you've ever been in the job at all, my hat's off to you, and I appreciate what you did. But this is a very quickly, rapidly evolving profession. Things change weekly, monthly, yearly for sure. And the longer you've been out of it or the longer you haven't been on the road, you've been riding a desk, your perspective and your opinion tends to lose a little bit of relevancy. So I want to share stories from way back in the day and also things that happened last week. I think it's real important to have someone who's currently in it that can offer real world opinions and advice and stuff like that. So that's kind of how I got into it. I'm going to try to give opinions, explanations, share some stories, do it in kind of an unfiltered manner, not necessarily PC. I'll keep it clean, kid-friendly, but if there's a question, I'll answer to the best of my ability and honesty. So with that said, what I will do, or what I plan on doing on this podcast, is, first of all, hopefully it's not going to always just be me sitting there talking. I'd like to bring some other people on that are in the business, different ages, men, women, maybe some folks that have been out of it for a while, or some civilians that just have some educated opinions on law enforcement that they'd want to share. Emphasis on educated. I will answer your questions to the best of my ability, as honestly and I guess specifically as I can. I'll share my opinion on hot topics, things that are going on in law enforcement around the world that relate to law enforcement. Yeah, I'll share some crazy stories. I've had several things go on that some stories that still scratch my head and be like that couldn't have been real. And hopefully I have a variety of people, like I said, on the show over time as I get this podcasting thing dialed in a little bit. What I'm not going to do is I'm not going to give legal advice, and I won't give any specifics, dates, times, names, stuff like that. I'm not here on behalf of or representing my agency. This is just 100% Lima Charlie, and Lima Charlie only. So that's what I hope to do with this podcast. So I hope you find it riveting, right? So one of the biggest questions I always get is, why or how did you become a cop? What drew you to it? What led you to this path? Because in all honesty, looking back when I was a young man, I had no intentions of ever being a cop. Matter of fact, I would have laughed at you if you said I would have become a cop. Growing up, my old man, my dad was a cop, and he was my hero. He was a role model. Heck, I thought he was Superman. I thought he was the baddest man on the planet, but I never wanted to be a cop. Part of that was I was always, as a kid, very wild and independent, kind of anti-authoritative, if you will. I'm sure my friends and family from my younger days have some stories about that, but I was always kind of testing the limits, and I didn't like structure, and I didn't like rules and regulations and stuff like that. So kind of wild, adventurous, untethered as a kid, I would say. And then I was drawn to violence. I liked violence. So I'll explain both of those. Independent and wild. Like I said, I was kind of a runt, a late bloomer. So growing up, I was kind of smaller, but had I won't say a big mouth, but sometimes my decision making on when to be quiet and when to speak wasn't always there. So I found myself in lots of scraps sometimes, and I didn't like to back down from fights, so I got my butt handed to me multiple times as a kid. I didn't like the structure of school, so I was always out doing things sometimes when I was supposed to be at school. And as I got older and came into my teen years, that just kind of manifested as me going out being wild and testing the limits, and all that entails when a young man is out testing the limits. So I got a lot of constructive feedback, if you will, from a variety of sources growing up. So anyway, again, I was kind of wild and independent. I never was really into video games. I had an old video game. We're talking back in the day when it was like Atari and Pong and Space Invaders and stuff like that. I had the great honor of growing up in the greatest decade of all, the 1980s, so that was awesome. But I found solace in going out by myself a lot. I like to hang out by myself, go shoot tadpoles with a BB gun, go fishing, go just messing around, playing in the dirt and stuff like that. So I was very happy being by myself and being kind of independent. And I also like to be out wild and getting dirty as a boy and stuff like that. As far as violence goes, I was always drawn to violence. I found a certain beauty in it. I remember junior high and high school just being drawn to, contact or combat sports or full contact sports, where there was a beauty of seeing two stallions at their peak going head to head. I remember seeing Bo Jackson run over Brian Bosworth, these two iconic figures in football, and wondering who's going to win, and seeing that play out. I remember watching Mike Tyson, Roy Jones Jr., a bunch of other boxers, and just the beauty of the violence in the ring. They were just so far above everybody. And I was always drawn to that. I liked to fight. When I was a kid, I was also drawn to contact sports, football, wrestling, stuff like that. I really love the adrenaline and the excitement of it, kind of the uncertainty or the test of it. I always felt good afterwards, even if I lost. So I was kind of drawn to that. I tried a lot of sports growing up. I was never awesome at one sport, but I was pretty good at most sports. I had an eclectic approach to sports. Everything from I took ballet, which isn't a sport, it's an art. But I did gymnastics, swim team, wrestled, played football, baseball, basketball, ran track a little bit. Got into boxing. Later on in life, got into judo and jiu-jitsu and kickboxing and pancrase, sambo, a bunch of different things. But I was drawn to it. So I played a large variety of sports. And I always thought that was pretty cool. My parents never really forced sports on me. but they gave me the opportunities to play a lot of sports. And, you can pick up one thing from every sport and it'll help you out in all these other sports as well. So I thought that was really, really beneficial. But again, going back to the violence, I liked it. I was drawn to it. And thank God I had some role models and some guidance that helped me fine tune and focus that towards a good end. What I mean by that is violence is a part of nature. It's always going to be there, right? It's in everything we see, everything we do. Some people can use violence for good. Some people can use violence for bad. I was, again, fortunate. I got some direction where I was able to hone some skills related to violence and then turn around and use those to teach other people how to protect themselves and put those skills towards what I like to think of as a good endeavor throughout life. So back to becoming a cop. So again, I was kind of anti-authoritative, never wanted to be a cop growing up. I thought I was going to be a professional football player or a professional lifeguard. Those were my aspirations coming out of high school. Obviously, that didn't work out. With that said, though, I remember moving out of state as a young man with some buddies and trying to kind of find my way as a man in this world. And at some age, around 23, 24, up until that point, my whole focus had been on working out, playing sports, chasing women, and just making enough money to go out and party with my buddies on the weekends. The weekend started on Wednesdays and ended on Sundays for us. But at some point, I realized that was not going to be productive for me moving forward. So I started thinking about stuff like, wow, man, I need to get insurance. I need to get an actual job that's going to pay a salary, not these hourly gigs that I was doing up until then. And I spent some time on the phone with my dad talking about law enforcement. And, he's really cool. He never pushed me towards it. I think he gave me an unfiltered, objective opinion on it. And there's a lot of things that drew me to the profession. On top of that, I met a recruiter for a large metropolitan police department, and he spent a lot of time talking to him. And there's a lot of aspects of law enforcement that really drew me to it. So, to explain, being a cop, you're highly independent, right? I mean, you spend 10, 12 hours driving around in a squad car or working a beat or something like that without anybody over your shoulder, a manager telling you what to do. You respond to calls as needed. But so much of the job is up to you. If you want to go to work and have a busy day, you can have a really busy day. Do a lot of officer-initiated stuff. And be proactive, right? All the spots where you can go hunt bad guys and do stuff like that. Or if you're having a bad day and you just want to kind of lay back and not be busy, you can do that as well. And again, some of it has to do with the call volume that's going on and where you work and stuff like that. But that was one of the things that really drew me to it, was there's a strong sense of independence. And at the same time, kind of coupled with that independence, you're part of a closely knit team, right? There's a brotherhood, the thin blue line that you hear about. It is. For the people that have been in law enforcement, they have a certain bond that transcends a lot of stuff. They're brothers and sisters. Because if you haven't done this job, you can't understand it, and it's really hard to explain it or appreciate it. It's one of those deals where the only way to know it is to do it. So you have that independence in law enforcement coupled with a sense of team and a brotherhood. And I really like that. That's one of the things I really liked from some of the sports I played is that sense of brotherhood. I remember playing a little football in college and just thinking those guys are my brothers forever because we worked out together. We sweat, bled, triumphed, lost. We did all that stuff together. Worked hard, played hard, all that stuff. And you develop a bond with those guys that'll never go away. I look at some of my best friends from high school were guys I played sports with. And I think it was going through adversity, physical and mental, overcoming and working through things. So I really like that aspect of team, if you will. Law enforcement is one of those gigs where you get independence and that sense of team all together. It's pretty neat. And it's a good job, right? It's got a solid cause. Bottom line is there is a thin line between society and utter chaos. It seems like that line's getting thinner and thinner, but that's law enforcement. It's necessary. There's always going to be job security for cops, and they pay decent, and you get benefits and all that good stuff. So that's kind of what drew me to being a cop. The other thing that kind of drew me to being a cop is that there's a variety of cops out there, right? It's not a cookie cutter thing where you have to be a certain kind of cop. Just like doctors, you have a variety of doctors. You got surgeons, general practice, doctors that deliver babies, doctors that are developing cures for stuff. There's a whole bunch of type of doctors out there. Mechanics, right? There's diesel mechanics, there's regular mechanics. I'm not a mechanic, but there's a bunch of mechanics out there. Different types of teachers. You got college, high school professors. You got science teachers, math teachers. Same thing with law enforcement. What's kind of always cracks me up is people see the badge or the uniform and they think, oh, you're a cop. And they just lump you into all cops are the exact same. And they forget that there is a large, large variety of cops out there. That was one of the final things that drew me to it was you can kind of pick and choose what type of cop you're going to be within law enforcement. So an example, you got someone who's very cerebral, likes diving into the minutiae of things, likes paperwork, stuff like that. They can be very, very good detectives, right? You get some people that are just really into, you get some guys that go into crime scene investigation. They become troopers, right? They like investigating, not crime scenes, accidents. They like investigating accidents. They can see an accident scene and tell you exactly what happened and do all the measurements and stuff like that. You got some cops that like to work in the schools. They become school resource officers. You have some cops that love to do traffic enforcement. They become part of a traffic unit. You have more administrative cops that like to get into the administrative part of deals. We have cops that are open space, cops, and they spend most of their shift riding a mountain bike up in open spaces. You got animal control, traffic enforcement, and then you got the other auxiliary positions like a SWAT team or a drug task force, stuff like that. So I love that there's a variety in law enforcement. I could kind of pick and choose based off my own personal strengths and philosophy is what I wanted to do. And so that's what I did. I started this career in 1994. And I've had kind of a cool career path. As I mentioned at the beginning, it's a little bit different than the typical career path in law enforcement. And so I started off and worked for a very, very small mountain town police department, kind of in a very rich touristy place. But there was only 6 of us. We had a chief, a sergeant, 4 cops. We were so small we didn't even have 24-hour coverage. We were on call from 2 to 6 a.m., right? 0200 to 0600. And it was very slow. I remember going 2 or 3 days without hearing my radio go off my car, wondering if there was anybody working dispatch or not. So that was a cool agency because we didn't have all the resources like you see on TV. I mean, we didn't have crime scene or, crime scene investigators or detectives. I mean, you took a call from beginning to end. It was yours, the full tilt. If you had to write a warrant or investigate or collect evidence or whatever, it was yours from beginning to end. So I did that for a short time, a year, and it was very eye-opening. I got my feet wet being a patrol officer. From there, I went to another agency, a bigger metropolitan agency, how do I describe it? It was a high-tempo agency. We were busy. Lots of low-income gangbangers, stuff like that. It was very, very. The operating tempo was high-pitched, to say the least. And man, I loved it. That's where I really got into being a proactive cop. And like I said, there's different types of cops. I've always leaned towards being more of a hunter. I enjoy hunting bad guys. And that agency allowed me to hunt bad guys because it was a target-rich environment. The area I worked in was really busy, high call volume, and lots of bad guys out there. But it was almost too busy because we were so continually getting calls for service through dispatch. Sometimes you couldn't be proactive because you were just going from one call to another call to another call for a whole shift. Anyway, I did that for several years. Once there, that's where I kind of got my feet wet in the combatives arena. And by combatives, I mean, picture combatives as an umbrella. And under the combatives umbrella, you have firearms, hand-to-hand, ground fighting, edged weapons, driving, and all that stuff. And they all kind of fall under that combatives umbrella. And that's where I got my feet wet and got to focus some of my skills that I had gleaned over the years growing up. So I became a combatives instructor, or defensive tactics, or arrest control, what they call it. It's their hand-to-hand combat system. I think at that time we were using PPCT, pressure point control tactics, which was really popular at the time. So I became an agency instructor in that. And then I also became a firearms instructor with that agency. So I did that for a short time. It was pretty neat. Typically, you have to be on an agency for 2 to 3 years before you can put in for that stuff. For whatever reason, I was doing well and making a name for myself, so I was able to become an instructor both those disciplines within the first year after I got out of my training program. Shortly after that, I put in and was accepted, tried out for, and became a SWAT team operator for that agency as well. So that's kind of where I got my feet wet, was delving into more of the tactical side of law enforcement and instructing. And I really liked it. It was eye-opening. I discovered that was one thing that I could see myself doing, that I enjoyed as much as being a cop, was teaching cops and instructing cops, training cops. So I did that for a couple of years, and I really liked it. During that time, I went on and got some other certifications. I became an edged weapon, knife tactics instructor, started doing that as well, and got my feet wet instructing. So that was pretty cool. Following there, I got a little big for my britches, and I wanted to go to a bigger agency where I thought there'd be more opportunity. I ended up going to a larger agency in the same state. And again, once there, I became an FBI defensive tactics instructor. The first agency used PPCT for hand-to-hand stuff. This other agency used FBI defensive tactics. So I went on to become an FBI defensive tactics instructor, a firearms instructor there, and a driving instructor. A little bit after that, I became a ground tactics instructor, so teaching cops how to fight on the ground and stuff like that. So I loved the training part. Hated working at that agency. And there's some other personal stuff going on at that time in my life. Got to go through a nasty divorce and stuff like that. So it was just, it was kind of a tumultuous time in my life. Loved the teaching aspect, didn't like the job. But after divorce, I met my wife, my second current wife, wife forever, and she was graduating with her master's degree while we were dating. And I had never gone to college. Well, I played a year of college football, got an injury, and that was the end of my college career back then. Couldn't play football, didn't see any sense in going to school, right? So, my confidence was pretty low at that time. I didn't consider myself smart or an academic. Looking back at high school, I always viewed myself as kind of that dumb, knuckle-dragging jock. Did not like school. I liked school for the social part and for playing sports. Did not like going to class or anything like that. So, with that said, my confidence level was pretty low. I never could see myself going to college and getting a degree. But my wife, she was graduating with her master's degree, and she's a little cocky and competitive and talking smack. And being a pretty competitive person myself, I decided, hey, you know what? I can do this. So I decided to go back to college and try to get my bachelor's degree. That was an endeavor. So I ended up quitting the job I was working at. I'd got my feet wet and whetted my taste for instructing. So I thought, I will take all the experience I had being an instructor and the certifications I had racked up, and I'm going to start a training business where I can do training and consulting, train law enforcement, military in different areas of combatives and tactics. So I started a business, and I quit that job, so I was working from home, and I tackled going back to school. So it was really interesting. I'd like to say it was, a smooth, efficient experience. I ended up taking about 5 to 6 years to complete that degree. But a couple things happened during that time. First, I got my training and consulting business kind of up to speed. I was able to write and design a couple curriculums, get them published, and then post approved. So post means police officers, standards, and trainings. Every state has a post board. Well, at that time in my state, you could submit curriculum and get it approved as advanced curriculum, meaning it wasn't required to become a peace officer, but it would be offered as advanced curriculum for ongoing education purposes for law enforcement. And it was kind of a big deal to get something post-certified because it was the post stamp of approval, so to speak. So I had a couple curriculums that I got post-approved. I took those and got them post-approved in other states, Arizona, New Mexico, Wyoming, the U.S. Virgin Islands. Took it to the Navajo Nation, stuff like that. So it's pretty cool. So I started getting to travel around a little bit and do some training and consulting. Got my feet wet as an expert witness for a couple court cases involving use of force with local law enforcement agencies. So it's a pretty neat deal, kind of a confidence booster, reaffirming that I did have a knack for training or instructing, and that I was actually doing something productive. I was actually, what I always like to think is I was actually teaching people. I was providing them with skills and knowledge to save their lives, right? Because in law enforcement, you have to have certain skills and knowledge, or else you can become a statistic. All you got to do is look on the news as of this week of the law enforcement officers killed in the line of duty, and it's not a good pace one right now. But anyway, with all that said, I thought I was doing something worthwhile, something I really enjoyed, and then I tackled school, and that was a whole different endeavor. But every class, every semester, every year that I got under my belt, my confidence level went up just a little bit more, because I was accomplishing things through adversity and struggle that I did not think I was capable of accomplishing. So I got about 2.5 years into it, and then I decided to take a little break. My training business was going well. We had a new addition to the family. There's a bunch of stuff going on. Some court stuff with my ex-wife. So I was pretty busy. So I decided to take a little break from school. Continue to do the training and consulting and all that good stuff. Develop some more curriculums, get my name out there nationally. It's pretty neat. So a year or so goes by, I decided to get back into the school game and finish up my degree, because now I was like getting close, right? I think I had a year left to get my degree. And lo and behold, I come back and they had changed the program. So I no longer could just jump in there and finish. There was like 2 more courses I had to take. And they changed the name of the program. It went from a Bachelor's of Science in Criminal Justice to a Bachelor of Science in Criminal Justice Administration. So that was almost enough to sidetrack me from continuing. But my wife, being who she is, gave me the proper motivation and direction to get back into it. Long story short, I went ahead and finished up my degree, graduated with honors, which was pretty cool. That was something I never thought I was going to accomplish. When I graduated high school, it was like when they were calling out names for us to come up get our diplomas, and they were coming to my name chronologically. I was like, I don't know if they're going to call my name or not. So it was a neat experience. My confidence level went up a lot, which is a lesson I've learned and I've tried to impart with other people, with my kids, and in life in general, is that when you think your capacity and you think you can't do any more, you're typically at about 40% of what you're capable of. And it's all up here, right? It's the decision to press on, to press forward, and to work through and over adversity. Because every time you get through over adversity or an obstacle, you just became a little bit stronger, a little bit wiser, a little bit more educated, and your confidence level goes up. And that's really what getting that bachelor's degree did for me. To the point that I decided to go into graduate school, and right after that, not even take a break, and knocked out a master's degree in a couple of years. So I got a master's degree in education and training, workforce development. So it was pretty cool. It was an experience. It was definitely an endeavor and a struggle doing that. But I'm really glad I did. And I owe a lot to my wife for motivating me to do that. So with that said, and by the way, I still don't consider myself an academic or one of the more cerebral cops out there, but my confidence level has definitely gone up because of pushing through, not giving up, and working through that problem, if you will. So where did I get where I'm at now? So I'd been in law enforcement for about 10 years when I decided to pull the plug and go back to school. During that time, as I mentioned, I was traveling around the nation and my state, teaching and instructing cops and military personnel. And I ran across a group of individuals at a co-training event up at a military base. They were putting on a week-long training for local law enforcement. And one of the individuals was doing some heavy-duty recruiting for his agency. And he talked to me a lot about becoming a reserve. When he found out I had been a cop before, and they were impressed with how I was I guess my skill level of instructing and how I approached instructing and teaching cops. And I didn't want anything to do with that. I didn't think I was ever going to get back into law enforcement. I was enjoying teaching, being a consultant, and kind of, the freedom of working by myself and, from home. And but he was persistent, and he was a great guy. And the 4 people from this particular agency that I met stood out to me then. They were solid guys, operators, skilled, tactical, articulate, true professionals. And we thought a lot alike. And so after a week of hanging out with these guys and getting to know them, I started teaching some classes up at their agency. I'd come in and they would host a couple classes and I would teach them. And then I began teaching some other classes. A train the trainer class that was put on throughout the state for people who were going to be lead instructors. And so I kept finding myself back at this agency teaching. And through networking with them and hanging out with them, he beat me down, and I actually signed up to be a reserve deputy for the sheriff's office. And so it was pretty cool. I did that for about 6 months, and they treated the reserves a little bit different. The reason I didn't want to do it is because typically a reserve is like your paper bitch, go direct traffic or run this paper over here or do errands for them, right? And their approach wasn't that at all. They were trying to get experts from different areas to come into the reserve program so they can then leverage that expertise and benefit their overall training program and stuff like that. And true to form, when I became a reserve with them, they leveraged me as an instructor, and I really enjoyed that and appreciated their being authentic with their goals and desires, and then sticking to what they told me they wanted to accomplish. So it was a pretty neat experience. About 6 months into it, I had done a gig as an expert witness for a local district attorney's office for a shooting that had happened at a local PD, and I was struggling with getting paid. I had submitted my invoice. They loved my we won the court case. They were impressed with how I presented myself, but they were dragging their feet getting paid. So I was in this guy's office. The gentleman who had been recruiting me, he was a sergeant over training at this agency at the time. And I was kind of, bitching and moaning, talking about, I can't believe this. I'm going to actually have to take this district attorney's office to court to get paid. And blah, blah, blah. This is the only thing I don't like about working from home is, all the paperwork and the logistics of getting paid and stuff like that. And he's like, well, have you ever thought about getting back into it full time? We may have an opening. I was like, oh, let me think about it. There's some comfort in having a paycheck coming in every month, right? When you're working for yourself, it's great. You can make a lot of money when things are going well. But when things are slowing down, or let's say a COVID hits or something like that, that can really put a crimp in your style. So I went back home and talked to the wife about it, and she was a big supporter of me maybe going back full time for that, the consistency of benefits and pay and all that stuff. So I was actually teaching a building search class for one of their new hire groups, and I get a phone call from this individual, and he says, the recruiter, we'll just call him a recruiter, and he says, hey, if you were serious, I can start you on Monday. And there you go. Started that Monday full-time as a deputy with that sheriff's office, and since then it's been awesome. I kind of regret not finding that office earlier on in my life. They're amazing. They're better than any agency I've ever worked for. They let me do what I want. I'm heavily embedded in the training there. I get to do all the fun stuff that I wanted to do. I got to get on the Marshall Violence Offender Task Force, the SWAT team, and then I'm heavily embedded in their training. I was a field training officer and all that stuff. But the biggest thing about it is that recruiter then ended up getting promoted up to commander and division chief and all that stuff, and just a great guy. All those people still work there that I initially met that drew me to him. And their approach on training and wanting to provide, realistic, authentic training to make their cops the best cops they can be is really what keeps me happy there. So that's kind of where I'm at now. That's up to speed. think I've been there for 8 years now. So that's been the last 8 years. But in a story, or I guess in a short story form, that's kind of the background of me, how I got into law enforcement, why I like it, that wild, independent spirit I had as a kid, enjoying combat sports or full contact stuff. I get to do all that stuff every week. I mean, how many other jobs you get to go get, shoot and fight and train and get paid for it? So I get to do that almost every week. And I get to share that with other people. So I truly believe that the psychomotor skills and the mental skills that we teach are changing people's behavior later on. It's going to save cops' lives and hopefully help cops save other people's lives too. So, here I am all these years later, still loving what I do, and it truly is the best show on earth, the stuff we get to see and so forth. But anyway, kind of wrapping up today is I wanted to give you a brief overview of what choir practice is, why we call this choir practice, what we hope to accomplish with it, a little bit about my background. So when I do spout off with an opinion on something or answer questions, you guys have a little bit more understanding of where I'm coming from, just not some retired dude or someone with no experience chiming in. Because I'll be honest with you, that is probably my number one pet peeve, is when people are quick to offer opinions on stuff, but they have no education, training, or experience to do so, which means their opinions is worth about, a bunch of ant crap. So that is who I am, Lima Charlie. For you guys know the phonetic alphabet, you can probably guess why I chose that name for this show. But Lima Charlie, choir practice. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Moving forward, I think we're going to talk about some crazy stories and some of the hot topics in law enforcement, and any questions or comments you guys might have. So we'll see you then.
You never met a man like me, you wouldn't understand. I'm in a rock and roll business, honey. Well, I'm in a rock and roll band, and we were headed for the top, babe. Way back in 91, some record business scumbags took it from us. Well, they forgot my gun. Well, now we're back in business, folks. Now come to claim what's